Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Critical Q&A, the show where I answer your questions based on what you have sent me by email at AskChrisShelton@gmail.com. We are coming up on episode 300 in a couple weeks, and I'm a little excited about that. I never imagined when I started this show, and I've said this many times along the way, that it would go this long, that you would have this many questions, that this would be an ongoing thing. And I am pleased as punch, of course, about it. This has definitely been a popular show. And your questions have been wonderful. So do keep them coming. I've got a long queue, some of which I don't have the answers to, and I don't know if I'm ever going to answer them. Honestly, some of them have been sitting on for a while because of that exact thing, asking me specifics about Quentin Hubbard and stuff. I don't know, but as much as I can and within the best of my ability, I am trying to give you guys the best and most complete answers that you can get to these questions. So I hope that they have been good for you. I wanted to plug the podcast that I did this week with Alonda Carter. She is a multi-level marketing survivor and activist, and anti-MLM activist now. And this is very, very similar to what I do and what Lloyd Evans does, and so many others of us who are doing online activism or online work to expose and educate about the abuses of toxic practices or toxic organizations, and MLMs or multi-level marketing schemes or direct selling schemes or any other word you want to use for what they're doing under the model of a sort of infinite chain marketing or selling. It's culty. It's flat out culty. And I am far from the first person to say that. But on this channel, it is high time that we take a look at that from our perspective. And so my interview with Alonda is our first foray into that. I've got another podcast I'll be recording this week with another man who has written an extensive work on it. And we will be going into even more detail about the history, the practices, the rapaciousness, and certainly the cult tactics that are used to recruit and retain members in MLMs. And anyway, I cannot warn you guys off of those things loudly or forcefully enough. Run, don't walk away from quote unquote business opportunities that are being presented to you by friends on social media and lots of other venues. So anyway, I hope you guys will check that out and the future content that'll be coming on that. And I also wanted to plug the Critical Conversation show. I see that sometimes you guys, some of you aren't aware of the fact that I am doing a live call-in show every Friday night at 6 o'clock Denver time, Mountain Standard Time, which is 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can do the math on where you're located. But it's Friday nights. It's live. It is right here. It is with my wonderful wife, Melissa. We check in with Seven, the Wonder Cat. We talk about current events. We talk about things people want to talk about who are calling into the show. And I would really, really love to grow that show. We've got a little community forum there of people who are regularly listening and participating. And it has just been a really wonderful experience. And we have covered some really, really good territory. And I usually give a briefing during the show about my university studies and what's happening with that and what I'm learning, and sharing the goods. And my wife gets to contribute to the show as well, and she's got some brilliant ideas. So anyway, I just want to encourage you guys to check it out if you don't know about the show, because it is a live show. And it is an opportunity to ask me questions. It is not a Q&A show as such, but it is an opportunity to call, talk to us about stuff. And there you go. That's the whole point of that show. So those little plugs being said, let's go ahead and get on with your questions. Vera Fox, what does Scientology say about body improvement? Like Cruz's facelift, Botox. Isn't his body a vessel he will eventually dump, just like everyone else? Hubbard seems to be an excellent example of how not to take care of yourself. What about Travolta's improvements? Thanks for the question, Vera. Okay, I think you're gonna like what we're gonna go over here, or at least you'll find it interesting. The care of the body is something that Hubbard talked about and kind of ragged on early on in the history of Scientology, like very early on. In fact, I've got a reference, an issue here that goes all the way back, I think, to the 50s. Let's see. Yeah, this is Journal of Scientology, 1953. The Limitations of Homo Novus. And the editor's foreword says L. Ron Hubbard pulled no punches when he wrote these words, first published early in 1952. Now, I'm not going to go into, I'm going to try to avoid the techno speak of Scientologies here as much as I can. Most of this is in pretty regular English. He makes the point here, and this is, again, early on in the history of Scientology, and this is the sort of foundational thinking that it goes through as a sort of a thread through a lot of Scientology into the future, through the 50s and 60s and on all the way up to today. And Scientologists will alternately care very much about their body and care very much about taking care of it, to the point that it is a precept in Hubbard's Way to Happiness booklet from 1980. Taking care of your body, taking care of your teeth, taking care of your health, eating right, sleeping right. These are advised as moral precepts. So, and they're perfectly good moral precepts. People should take care of their bodies. But Hubbard had some other things to say about caring for the body earlier on. And so these two things kind of juxtapose. And so I thought, rather than, since I could find it and pulled it up pretty fast, I would read to you from the scriptures. Okay, so here we go. Hubbard is talking about care of the body, and he says an entire book can be written about, let's see here. Basically the pre-clear in his body and its care and his injunctions and insistences to others that they care for their bodies. You can produce soaring changes in tone if you will address this. And here's the quote. An entire book can be written concerning this therapy. An entire book has been written about it, the first book in Dianetics. This therapy could be styled the efforts of a theta being to reconcile the frailty of a messed body with the ethics of a theta being. They do not reconcile these two. Okay, he's juxtaposing the spirit, the theta, the thetan, and the body, the messed body, the actual living human body, right? He's saying that these two things don't really reconcile very well together. Schopenhauer, Xenu, the philosopher, and names without number in philosophy have been trying to make this reconciliation for eons. One says, defeat it all and die, for only by dying can you defeat it. Another says, you can't win, therefore the only victory is in refusing to try to win. Christianity and a million other anities have struggled with this problem, and the result is a potpourri of answers, none of which can reconcile the problem. You have a soul. It goes off somewhere. You don't know about it. You are a soul. You don't know about it. Today we live in a vast culture called worship the body. Medical doctors, school teachers, parents, traffic officers, the whole society unites into this war cry, care for the body. This stems from the concept that the body is all that one has, that he will have just one body, that his total devotion is the care of that body. A body is a vegetable. It's not even a sentient vegetable, for it lacks perception in the whole theta range. Like any vegetable, it grows from seed and has habit patterns which help it survive. And like any vegetable, one way or another, it gets used by others. Early theta beings saw messed bodies, regular, bodies like this one, saw messed bodies acting and being as though they were self-motivated. This was a curiosity. The early theta being did not know that these messed bodies depended wholly for their wits upon the guidance of a decayed theta being. The bodies looked like entities of considerable force and skill. The theta beingness of them was hidden and unapparent. Thus, even theta beings have been fooled by messed bodies. A messed body belongs, whether it belongs to the race of man or the race of ants, is only an animated vegetable. Given a theta being to guide it, it becomes part of a composite such as Homo sapiens. Here we have a theta being decayed into unknowingness, devoted to the care of a messed body. The quote-unquote I of this body, the actual volition of it, all its wits and skills are theta things, derived from the guidance of a theta being. By itself, the body would live, walk around, react, sleep, kill, and direct an existence no better than that of a field mouse or a zombie. Put a theta being over it, and it becomes possessed of ethics and morals and direction and goals and the ability to reason. It becomes this strange thing called Homo sapiens, a being above animals and yet an animal. Okay, so he goes on in that same pace about, how bodies are just bodies. They're a dime a dozen. You've had billions of them. You'll have billions more. Why are you so wrapped up in care of the body? So that is I wanted to give that to you guys as a little bit of a this is a core belief or a piece of the dogma of Scientology that most Scientologists take very seriously from my experience in the practice of it. So we come to your question, Vera, about Botox, about plastic surgery, about, caring for and improving the body. Well, there's, on top of this business that Hubbard was writing back in the day about how caring for the body is kind of like, why are we doing that? You also have the fact that you have to have a body in order to get auditing, because you have to have hands to connect to an e-meter, and you have to have an auditor be able to see you, to ask you questions so that you can give him answers and get all the trauma and engrams and BTs and all the other crappy stuff away from you and free yourself. That requires a body. You can't go clear or OT if you don't have one, because there's no way to directly audit a theta being. So, in this sense, and for this reason, Scientologists have adopted the idea that bodies are important and should be cared for. And this is how they reconcile this earlier material about bodies, screw bodies, bodies aren't important, to later way to happiness precepts that say, hey, take care of your body. Present a good image. Have good PR. Be a shining example of Scientology in the world at large, according to another issue Hubbard wrote called What We Expect of a Scientologist, where you're supposed to go out and be a good shining example of the practice. So if you sort of think about or reconcile these things, what you get is a surface level care of the body and putting a good appearance on for PR purposes, and using the body to navigate life and communicate with other people and produce things. And most importantly for Scientologists, get auditing so that they can go all the way up the bridge to OT, which again requires a body, so that they can be eventually free of a body. That's the idea. And so along the way, take care of the body well enough to keep its purpose, keep it fit for purpose. But other than that, who cares? Now, when you get to somebody like a celebrity, though, there is a public imaging problem. And celebrities, kind of have this thing about looking young for as long as they can. And we have seen some of the horrific examples of how badly this can go. And let's face it, plastic surgery is a little bit of, not exact science. And people have had some pretty horrifying and tragic even results or from mishaps of plastic surgery or unintended consequences of it. So I'm certainly not somebody who endorses it. I think, natural bodies are natural, and I think that's okay. I think we age, and I think our considerations about aesthetics and beauty and that kind of thing could use some tweaking. And we see that as society rolls forward, and we start canceling some of the ageism that has existed. It's certainly in the media, maybe not out in the real world, but in the media, man, ageism is a thing. So that's getting a lot of pushback, but we still see this image problem. And there isn't anything in Scientology that says you can't do that, or that you even shouldn't do that. If you're a Tom Cruise or a John Travolta, it's understood you have a public image to uphold, and you're going to do what you're going to do those are your choices. You get to make those choices. Nobody's really too concerned in Scientology about what choices you make with your body, so long as it doesn't interfere with you getting money out of you and you doing the practices of Scientology. So that's kind of as complete an answer as I think I could give, including the Hubbard on it. And I hope that helps clarify what's up. Mia, without too much of a backstory, I am technically Jewish, but functionally, I am an atheist. My question to you is, can a person be anti-religious without being an anti-Semite? I don't in any way think keeping kosher or observing Shabbat will get me into God's good graces, because God doesn't exist. But when I hear anti-Semitic comments, my hackles go up. As I tell people, I might not be observant, but if the ovens get fired up again, I won't be spared. Thoughts? Hey, thanks for the question, Mia. Yeah, I got some thoughts on this. First off, yes, it's entirely possible to be anti-religious and not be anti-Semitic. There are plenty of places where you'll find people who are very, very anti-religious. I mean, in other countries, look to other areas, India, China, Japan, places where you will see pushback against religions that have not and never will touch Semitism or the Abrahamic faiths. Hinduism, Buddhism, Confucianism. I mean, these are religious philosophies or religions that have all kinds of pushback. And there's, all kinds of warfare that goes on in those areas between secularists and those believers, and between the groups. And anti-Semitism never comes up at all as any part of that stuff, because they're just not. That's not part of that religious picture as such. So there's that. But of course, I think you're probably talking more about the Abrahamic religions and the gross levels. I mean, really disgusting levels of anti-Semitism that exists at the depths of some evangelical thought, some conspiracy theory thinking. In fact, a lot of conspiracy theory thinking. It doesn't even take that long. You're a couple of videos into your radicalization process, and they're already throwing anti-Semitic stuff at you. It usually starts with very broad things that lots of people can agree with or think they could agree with in a fairly innocent way. And then it proceeds down the path of awful until the Jewish nation or the Jewish people or culture or whatever, because it's more than just a religion. There's a culture there. There's a lot to Judaism beyond just a set of books with some beliefs and ideas, and it's very old and it's very steeped in tradition. And personally, I respect the hell out of it because these are people who have faith or belief without being necessarily, in a general broad sense, without being very extremist about it, right? They actually tend to be very thoughtful and reflective, and are perfectly willing to argue about it, especially if you go to Israel, where they will definitely give you a good argument any day of the week. Okay, so as far as your hackles going up, my hackles go up too, and I'm not connected with Judaism in any way. So, keep in mind that there's also a human factor here too, right? I mean, the anti-Semitism conspiracy theories of, that go back hundreds, thousands of years, we have lost sight of what the origins of all of that are. I mean, it's crazy how history has tainted and twisted and corrupted and turned the Jewish people at every turn. I mean, it's really, it's really something else to go through in history. But, you know, I'm not sure exactly what else to say on this, except that we need to push back on bad data on this. It's just it's one of the oldest conspiracy type thinking that still exists. And it's high time that all the debunking on this become practically a part of school education at this point, because it's so damn widespread, especially in certain geographic areas of this country, where it really takes root. But it's not a matter of just an American problem or a Southern problem. I mean, this anti-Semitic thing has been centuries and centuries and centuries in the making. So we just need, public awareness and pushback on this from every level. And I don't know, those are kind of my thoughts about it. I know those aren't all really great and well-formed thoughts, but that's kind of where my head goes with this. Jonathan Perry. What if a Sea Org member during an auditing session reported to their auditor that they realized that in a past life they had met Hubbard, signed a contract 1 billion years ago, and claimed their tour of duty should be over? According to the mythology, advanced civilizations have existed before, and Hubbard has been around doing this research for a long time, as Buddha, for example. Who is to say he hasn't started Scientology in past lives? How would the auditors respond? How could they disprove it? I know it's a silly question, and a Sea Org member would be unlikely to do this, but exploring the contradictions in Scientology is one of the reasons it is so interesting. Perhaps it could be a way out using their own material. Xenu, bless you. Hey, Jonathan, thank you for this. And actually, I'm about to burst your bubble on this one, because I couldn't find it, okay? I love reading the scriptures to you guys. I really do, and I was really looking for this, but I couldn't dig it up easily, and I ran out of time to do so. So I'm just going to tell you from my memory. And I'm very certain about this. This isn't one of those fuzzy, hazy things in my mind. I remember very clearly that I believe there were at least one, possibly 2 places where Hubbard very clearly stated that Scientology has never existed before. The technology, the methodology of Scientology, the auditing process, never in this entire universe, in all the quadrillions of years, has anyone ever put together anything approximating Dianetics and Scientology. Hubbard has said, when he was standing on the aft deck in the dark of night with his Sea Org crew around him, learning celestial navigation, he's talked to them about how this isn't the first time we've all been together, how we have fought before. He was alluding to the Xenu narrative with all of that the sort of, what were they called? The loyal officers, right? That Scientologists, he was kind of implying that people who came back into the Sea Org or came into the Sea Org were people who had been on this journey before with Hubbard. And, of course, this is all just, bullshit. It's just camaraderie creation and morale boosting through imagination. But Hubbard was making claims like this. And so those claims were not that they were around as the Sea Org before. The Sea Org is new. The Sea Org's motto is "We come back," because of the earlier narrative about the loyal officers, who were about as close an analogy as Hubbard cared to make to the Sea Org. And of course he would, because he just came up with this narrative where the loyal officers had beaten the bad guy Xenu and locked him up. So of course he and the other Sea Org members had to be the heroes of that story. It's not commented on very often, but it's a point there, isn't it? And it's kind of an interesting one, that he was always the hero of his own narratives. Now, as far as somebody in the Sea Org going in and claiming this, there's another issue where Hubbard says not only has there not been any auditing, but in the past, way, way back in the past, there was, and he came up with a name for it, which I could not remember, but it was basically a kind of therapy or a kind of attempted assistance on the part of one Thetan helping another Thetan by ripping off his pictures, by just taking them. So if you had basically taken his memories, so to speak, right? So if you had memories, and these memories are created and are stored as mental image pictures, which are sheets of energy that are stored in this thing called a mind that you carry around with you, not dissimilarly to Jacob Marley's chains and all the stuff that was attached to them from the Christmas Carol, right? You're carrying all this crap around with you. And it's dispersed in mental masses all around you. And when your body dies, you as a Thetan, you carry this shit around with you. So Hubbard said that other Thetans in the past might come along and see you carrying around pictures of trauma or, troublesome things or implants or whatever it was, and they would just kind of take them. And you wouldn't have them anymore, and therefore no more stress, no more trauma, right? No more memory. It's sort of the, what was that movie with Jim Carrey about the spotless mind? That movie, the full title is escaping me right now. Sorry about that, but the Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, I think that's what it was called, and it was kind of that idea, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Yeah. So Hubbard said that kind of thing was basically the ultimate form of therapy that had been created before Hubbard came along and came up with Dianetics and Scientology. So if you believe Hubbard, and that's what he did say, he wrote it down, then the poor hapless Sea Org member in the scenario you present, Jonathan, would simply be shown those issues and be told in no uncertain terms, dude, you're full of shit. The Sea Org was never around before. You did not finish a billion-year contract. And if you want out of the contract, there's a routing form, go get on it, right? And they'll try to talk him out of it and harangue him out of it and all that. But that's how that would be dealt with. So good try, actually, at looking for and exposing contradictions in the Scientology materials. It just so happens that on this one, Hubbard beat you to the punch. Jennifer, in your critical Q&A number 296, you said you used to daydream about food when you were in the Sea Org. I don't know if the saying is known in the U.S. as well, but here in Germany, there's a popular saying, armies march on their stomachs. Considering the Sea Org is kind of military-like, as far as I understand it, why don't they at least feed their people well? Jennifer, this is a great question, and it actually does have an awful answer. So let me give it to you. So basically, the food allocation percentage of the budget for a Sea Org base, and let's go ahead and talk about PAC base, because that's what I know most about, and that's where I spend all my years in the Sea Org. There's a similar deal in Flag and any other Sea Org base, but how it works is you have a combined, on a Sea Org base, you have a number of different organizations. It's not all just one big happy family. It's all one big happy Sea Org group, but they're divvied up into these different churches, these different organizations. And so you have like the advanced organization, you have ASHO, and you have LA Org, and you have the management org, and you have Bridge Publications, and you have Author Services, and you have the IAS, the International Association of Scientologists. Their headquarters are in the PAC base. So all these different units, these Sea Org units, all work there. Each one of them has their own budgeting every week, their own allocation of money based on the income that they produced as a unit or as an organization. A percentage of that income is taken right off the top and sent to management. The management organization on the base is called the CLO, or Continental Liaison Office. That's where I used to work. In that management organization is a division for the base. The base, the physicality of the base, the buildings, the grounds, the engineering spaces, the heating, the cooling, all that stuff is contained within a division of the CLO's organizing board, Division 3, or 3A, actually. It's the PAC Estates Division. And in that Estates Division is the galley. That's central. It's a central galley function that feeds all the base. Now, the way that the galley functions is it is given an allocation from the CLO's budget. The CLO is receiving a percentage from all these organizations on the base. A certain percentage of that money is allocated to the chief steward. Chief steward is the one who gets the allocation and then has to do menu planning, budgeting how much they have against how much they can buy, to feed a crew of X number of people, 3 meals a day plus special meals for RTC and CMO whenever they ask. They get all kinds of special cheeses and meats and whatever else they want. That's the benefit of rank and privilege in the Sea Org, and it's a very, very tiny privilege, but that's what you get. So they might get cheese plates and stuff like that in the middle of the night or in the middle of the afternoon if they want, and the galley will put that together. But most of the money is being used to feed the bulk of the crew. And we're talking about somewhere between, when I was there, about 1,000 meals a day, 3 times a day. Because they're not only servicing all the people on the PAC base, but they're also sending food over to the management over at the Hollywood Guarantee Building, the HGB. That's a 12-story building with a whole bunch of more people who are doing they are middle management. They are not international management. They are right below international management. So you have management at the West US level. You have this international worldwide management organization down the street. And the PAC Estates Galley is feeding all of them. So all of these units are sending in money, but how much money are they sending? Who decides what the percentages are? And based on those percentages, how much money are you going to have for each person? Now, I do not remember the numbers. This was not my area, but I do. But I'll say for purposes of analogy here for explaining this, if the ideal menu planning that had actually good food on it, meat, potatoes, vegetables, salads, they could do menu planning, and they tried. They did do this kind of menu planning. The chief steward desperately wanted to feed the crew better food. This was not a case of maliciousness on the part of the crew towards the rest of the crew. This was a case where the chief steward is being given X amount of dollars, feed the crew. And if the usual amount of money you would need to feed the crew is, let's say, 50 cents a head, and you only get 10 cents a head in money, you're only going to be able to buy lesser quality food, rice, beans. Those are real cheap in bulk. That's one of the reasons why rice and beans is a Sea Org thing. Eggs are cheap, certain kinds of meats and stuff. They can figure things out, but bottom line is they're not being given enough money on a weekly basis at a usual standard basis to actually afford to feed the crew a decent menu. And that's why they don't get it. Now, these adjustments, these percentages could be adjusted. A study could be done. They could go look and see what the problem is. It's not like the finance people on the base don't know this and don't understand why it is that there isn't enough money. If the organizations aren't producing enough income to send a certain amount of percentages to the management organization, and the management organization's percentages of what it can afford to put into the galley aren't very high, then the entire crew ends up suffering as a result of that. The percentages are fixed based on what international finance says. The finance systems of Scientology are designed by international finance people, not by people locally on the base. They are being given a finance system, and they just have to comply with it and make do as best they can. So that's how and why it is that the food at the pack base is such crap, because almost every single week, the allocations of money to the food allocation came out to 20 to 30%, sometimes less, of what was actually needed to provide a very healthy, very stable, and very filling diet for everybody. And that's the awful truth of it. And the international finance guys and David Miscavige personally are well aware of those situations. Remember that at the international base, it's even more draconian because they have food cards and they have sleep cards and they have these benefit cards, and they'll just take them away from you, and then you don't get to eat at all. So it's even worse. The closer you get to Miscavige, the tougher the conditions become. At least we had a canteen we could go to that had stocks of some prepackaged food, candy bars, even some frozen meals for a while. They were stocking stuff like that. So you could theoretically go into the main mess and see it's crap for this meal and then go over to the canteen and supplement your food that way if you got some money. And in desperation, people will shoplift from the canteen. I both did that and watched other people did that. Paid it back, so anyway, so that's kind of how the food situation goes there. And I hope that clarifies why it is that the Sea Org, that clarifies how they do it, why they do it. Because if you keep people sleep deprived and food deprived, they're easier to control in some ways. Not on a really long-term basis, but remember that what goes on in the Sea Org is a traumatic bonding. It's rewards and punishments and rewards and punishments. And the rewards they're not that big of a deal. A movie out is a big, huge reward in the Sea Org. That's big. Doesn't really cost the organization much of anything to send 30, 40 people to the movies for an award night. They're pumped for, weeks, months, and you can continue abusing them every day. You dish out rewards on an infrequent, random, uncertain basis. You dole out punishments on a fairly regular basis, but the playback of these two things combined with the dogmatic thinking and the purpose of saving the world and all of that creates its own little toxic stew of awfulness, which we call trauma bonding. And you are sort of, and this is earlier explained by terms like battered wife syndrome, where, you're being abused, you're in a situation that's no good, but you can't get out of it because you're compelled to stay there because they're so good too. And they're so bad, but they're so good, and you get this head trip. And that's one of the biggest mechanisms of coercive control. So that's kind of why it's happening. Jeff Boyer, listening to your short answer to a question about Black Dianetics, I was struck by the thought, was LRH just a bald-faced liar? It seems that so much of Scientology is composed of, quote, just stuff from his fertile imagination combined with, well, just lies. Government and psychiatry/psychology conspiracies to take him down, his war record and attendant wounds, his second wife who wasn't. I mean, dang. Xenu can be chalked up to his sci-fi imagination, but the supposed abilities of upper-level OTs? Didn't he have to know it was all lies? How could he not? Okay, Jeff, well, clearly we are looking to, Hubbard's intentions and ideas and intent. So it's uncertain, we can only conjecture about this. Okay, I got to kind of put that conditional out there. That being said, I have said many, many times that Hubbard was absolutely a pathological liar, a megalomaniac, narcissist, authoritarian, lots of labels apply to L. Ron Hubbard. Non-believer was not one of the labels I've ever applied to L. Ron Hubbard, though. He did believe in his own subject. And, it kind of comes down to, are we going to look at this from our headspace, or are we going to look at it from his? From his point of view, grew up in the Midwest, was put upon, hated his education, but could write, could tell tall tales, had a very, very active imagination, and found that he could manipulate other people using that imagination and his exploits of adventure and excitement that he could always bedazzle a room with. And then he is a writer of some, success during the Pulp Fiction years. The war comes. He goes into World War II. He's a total failure. I mean, total failure. He had big, huge aspirations, wanted to go into military intelligence, wanted to be a spy, ended up becoming a, captain of two different ships, which he totally screwed up the command of and was relieved of his command. Then proceeded to lie about all of that. Said he suffered war wounds when he really didn't. He was just looking for an out to stay away from his wife and kids because he didn't want to go back to Washington State and have to take any responsibility for them. So much easier to just be a serial philanderer and get it mixed up in the occult with Jack Parsons in the 1940s. And from there, it was a hop, skip, and a jump over to working with Joseph Campbell and coming up with this idea of a mental health therapy of Dianetics. And all this time, according to what we have from his private writings, remember we have those affirmations, where Hubbard believes that he is in a really bad way and at the same time has aspirations of being the master of all he surveys and convincing himself that he is amazing to women, dominating men, the ruler of his domain. He is all that. He has to keep pumping himself up and telling himself this stuff. So then he comes up with this Dianetics thing because he understands hypnotism and he understands a little bit about psychotherapy, and he's working with these other people who are giving him ideas too. And they come up with this Dianetics stuff. And Hubbard was very clearly going into auditing sessions with the intent of resolving his personal demons, his issues. And he thought over the course of time, maybe from the very beginning, but certainly by the mid to late 1950s, Hubbard was believing his own bullshit. Now, whether he ever thought it was bullshit or not is actually a question. It's an open-ended question. I have said that I believe he was well aware of how he was conning people. But let's not forget the levels of the depths of self-deception that people can engage in. Cognitive dissonance and motivated reasoning and stuff, we talk about these things as fallacies or fallacious thinking or ways that people fool themselves. But people can also apply those same kind of fallacies to themselves. They can be, they can pump themselves up on their ego. They can tell lies to themselves as easily as they lie to other people about how great they are, how good they're doing, how wonderful everything is. And in fact, one wonders with the amount of this that goes on in the real world, whether any of us would really be able to get by if we couldn't tell ourselves a few fibs about ourselves as we go through life. You need those little morale boosts. You need those little assists. Well, Hubbard also potentially suffered from temporal lobe epilepsy. And this is a theory that I actually really to this day still subscribe to. This was, we laid this out in a podcast with Yuval Leor years ago on my channel. And it was really good stuff. And I really do believe that Hubbard could have had a physical condition, a temporal lobe epilepsy. And that's not the same thing as you don't have grand mal seizures. It's not like your regular, more commonly understood epilepsy. TLE, the epilepsies, the seizures that happen when you have TLE have different effects. You're not on the floor, kind of flopping around. You're in a God place. Your head goes to I am God. I am all that when it comes to religion. I am all seeing, all powerful, all knowing. People who have suffered from TLE have literally had spasms or seizures where they went tearing down the street telling people, I'm God, you better do what I tell you. I mean, we're really not rational stuff. It tends to be, apparently, according to what we've all went over with us, that TLE tends to go in, the seizures tend to cause religious exaggerated thinking or hyperbolic thinking or delusions of grandeur even. It can also go the other way, where you can, have this incredibly powerful feeling of that there is no God whatsoever, and that kind of thing. But I believe Hubbard went in the direction of having this incredibly spiritual awakening when he's having when and if he had these seizures. And he certainly spoke and acted and wrote as though he was a great religious philosopher, an incredible thinker, a humanitarian extraordinaire, and a person who was personally seeing to it as his mission in life that all of humanity was going to be benefited because of his existence. He was going to be the guy who was going to help everybody through these techniques. So, so I'm going over all of this because I'm trying to show that it wasn't just a matter, it's not a simple matter with L. Ron Hubbard of, oh, I have an idea, I know how I'll con these people. And then he writes, a 400-page manuscript of Dianetics and gets it published, and then proceeds to ride the wave and continue creating the movement and continue to do so, for 46 years until he dies. Every single day connected to writing on, lecturing on, giving orders about Scientology. Thousands and thousands of written pages, 5,000 recorded lectures, 25 basic books, pamphlets, briefings, all kinds of stuff, right? So much material. I mean, the full scope of it would fill this room. The amount of bullshit Hubbard wrote over 46 years just on the subject of Dianetics and Scientology. I don't believe that a simple con man would do that. Not to that extent. I think he really believed it. And I think he was using it in an effort to try to, like I said, address his own demons, which to the day he died, he couldn't do. And that's how I see it. And I'm not saying any of this to give the guy a pass. I hope that's obvious. None of this is, Hubbard was an okay guy because he really believed it. It doesn't matter what you believe. It matters what you do. And what L. Ron Hubbard did was nothing but awful. So, did he do it from a place of, full conscious awareness that he was fucking with people? Well, absolutely. Sometimes. Definitely. He admitted to it as much. He would say he would just do stuff just to do stuff, just to mess with people. So he did have this kind of thing going on. But if you ever really questioned Hubbard's intentions, or you really, really got into his face about it, you would very, very quickly be at the receiving end of Hubbard's ire. And that could be quite strong. So he felt quite motivated to defend his position and to keep writing and discussing and talking about and pushing out Scientology stuff. And I just don't think that, I don't know, man. I just don't think that volume of work and dedication that he had, despite everything else that we know and all the awful, I just don't think that is an indication of just a con man. I could be wrong, but this is a subjective question, so that's my opinionated subjective answer. There you go. All right, everybody, that is our show for this week. No flash answers this week, and I spent so long on those first 5 questions. Those are what we are doing. Thank you very much for listening to the show and your support for this show and for my channel. I really, really, really appreciate it. Times are tough. I hope times will be getting untough sooner than later. I would love to have more of y'all support the channel and the work that I'm doing here. I think that we have much, much, much more content to come in the future as we roll these shows out. And I learn more and more and somehow struggle through this master's program, which I'll tell you, some days I really wonder if I'm going to get through this thing, but I will. I am going to make this. It is a tough program, but I'm going to do it. Okay, so anyway, if you feel that this show is useful, entertaining, educational, supportive to you in some fashion, then perhaps return the favor by helping to support the show. Even $1 a month on Patreon helps. It adds up. You know, if 100 of you guys did that, that'd be a big deal. If 1,000 of you guys did that, that'd be a really big deal. Just $1, you know? But whatever. It's up to you. All right. Thanks for listening. I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.